So Ninja Gaiden 4 got a lot of confirmations thanks to Gamescom, as well as some other interviews that were going on the last month. Unfortunately, a very, very major concern was also confirmed for a lot of longtime fans, which was the handling of Ryu Hayabusa. I've played Ninja Gaiden 3 multiple times. I know that the one is the black sheep of the franchise, but it was the one that I initially got into. That and, funny enough, Dragon Sword on the DS, the weird one where you had to hold the DS on its side. I got really into those games. I really fell in love with the character Ryu, both just as a character, but also just most importantly for an action game, how he plays and controls. He's definitely my favorite among like the big three, that being Dante, Kratos, and Ryu, in my opinion. I really connected with them, and it was understandably frustrating for longtime fans for him to only be given the Dragon Sword as his primary weapon, with some like very, very few weapons being added as free DLC later. But then when Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, the updated version, came out for the Wii U and then later for the other systems, they clearly learned their lesson, and they gave him back his massive arsenal for the most part. And have it be, unlocked naturally as you complete the game. But sadly, it seems like history is repeating itself, and Ninja Gaiden 4 has decided to once again limit Ryu to only one weapon, which is his Dragon Sword. Now, this probably wouldn't have happened if Ryu was the only playable character. In fact, it would absolutely not happen if he was the only playable character, but he's not. He's also being joined with a newcomer, Yakumo of the Raven clan. And Yakumo, he looks cool. He's generic cool, though. Let's be honest here. He feels like he could fit into pretty much any game, honestly, in my opinion. But he is cool looking, I am excited to play as him. He does just look like an enormous amount of fun. But Ryu is, he's the best in my opinion, and I really don't like the idea of him being sidelined, especially after all these years. It feels like the developers' mentality is almost backwards, because they claimed in the interview, well, the reason why we're doing this whole thing with Ryu and this new character is because the new character is sort of a way of being like, oh, hey, we've been away from this franchise for so long. We want to give longtime fans and newcomers something new to look forward to. And that makes sense to some degree. But like I said, it feels a little bit backwards, that mentality of, no, it really feels like it's been this long and we should have this character come back after this many years, right? Like we were looking forward to returning to this character after being away from him for so long. So yeah, it's a little frustrating. I really feel like to avoid all of these issues, they could have just made it a 50-50 ratio, between time playing as one character as the other. It's as simple as that. It's like they have let's say there's 12 missions total, 6 for Ryu, 6 for Yakumo, and then maybe one final 13 level where the two of them team up or something. That's the best way they could have made this happen, or have it where both characters are just present with each other and you can switch between them whenever you want, simultaneously. It would be sort of like what they've already done with Ninja Gaiden 2. Ninja Gaiden 2 had a co-op mode initially that worked very well, and if you're playing single player in that mode, you can switch between the characters with the press of a button. And it worked really, really well, surprisingly well. Ninja Gaiden 3 even had sequences where you had AI companions helping you out in certain missions in the main campaign. So it's something that they've always been able to do very well, having AI-controlled characters at your side, and even the ability to switch between the two of them, which would have been perfect for this game. Now, who knows? Maybe that is an element that's in the game. Like I said, maybe later on, or maybe that's a mechanic they're hiding for when Ryu and Yakumo inevitably team up, and become allies, as opposed to rivals. However, we have gotten confirmation that the game will indeed have DLC, and they've said on multiple occasions during the interviews that they constantly say, well, yes, Ryu will launch with one weapon, which is clear as day. They haven't outright said oh, we're going to have DLC weapons, because they probably know that people are upset about that. But they also want to encourage players and being yeah, he'll launch with the Dragon Sword, but we obviously have DLC plans, and of course we'd be idiots not to jump on the idea of encouraging players to pay more money in order to get Ryu's massive arsenal back in their hands, which again, there's no sugarcoating it. Like, that's a very frustrating decision, like it's like a practice that we all can't stand. You've all heard the reasons why. My main reason is that it's obviously the most enjoyable and entertaining to actually unlock a weapon in an exciting manner. Like, take Ninja Gaiden 2, for example, where you battle, Wolf, the ruler of storms or whatever. That character, that boss is like, he's beautifully built up throughout cutscenes, throughout as you progress through the level, and then you get to the end of it, and he challenges you to a 1v1 duel in a, massive coliseum. And then you defeat him and you claim his weapon, right? Like, he's battling you with this crazy giant scythe throughout the entire fight, and defeating him and now having that in your hands and being able to use it throughout the rest of the game. Like, that's like the beauty of unlocking weapons. There's like a story to it. There's a sequence to it. There's a boss connected to it, and claiming their weapon, or just like finding a weapon somewhere in the overworld. Like, that's what makes unlocking things enjoyable. So you're not only robbing us of that, adding insult to injury, you're also making us pay for a very unsatisfying manner to unlock a weapon. So this practice ruins so many things. It goes into so many factors. But the way I think that they could fix this, fix both things, fix the fact that Ryu feels like he's being sidelined in the main game, as well as removing his massive arsenal. The best way that they can do this is just simply asking how are they going to choose to distribute the DLC weapons. Because if it's as I said that they're going to do it, which is basically a few months past, and they're like, hey, here's all of Ryu's classic weapons, his scythe, his talons, his rod, all his different weapon types that he's had throughout the past will all be able to be purchased on the PlayStation Store, but they'll be purchasable individually. That would be my least favorite way for them to distribute this content, because I hate the idea of just exiting the game, going into the PlayStation Store, pulling out my credit card and seeing hey, get the site for $7.99 plus tax, which I can totally see them charging those absurd, massive, ridiculous prices for just a single weapon. And then you unlock it, and then you jump back into the game, and you do what? You go back and you play missions you've already played, with characters that you've already experienced already all the way through, and then you just kind of fool around with the weapon for a little bit and probably just shut the game off after 30 minutes or something. That's just I feel like a lot of people would do, even if they were very attached to that weapon in the past. It's like you've lost that urge to go through the game again, even though you now have all these new weapons, especially if you have, once again, if each one is only $7. There of course will probably be a bundle choice that'll be $20 for his entire arsenal, and that's them being generous in their eyes. But I think that they need to avoid all of that and just make the best choice that they can make for Ryu's sake, for saving some of this game's good graces, is put all of that into just one massive single player expansion, like a standalone expansion, one the same size of something that you would get in the Neo games. Because that's the thing, Team Ninja have clearly proven with their more current games that they're very much going the DLC route. But what they always do very well, in my opinion, is that their base games are usually very good about having an absurd amount of content that is absolutely worth the price of admission, and then they just add on top of it with ridiculous amount of DLC content that is shockingly large in scale. There's cutscenes, they're highly produced cutscenes, bosses, new enemies, new areas, the whole shebang, everything that you would want to get in a massive DLC, similar to something like Bloodborne, The Old Hunters. That's my favorite, all example of how to do DLC right, because it's a really beautiful 15, maybe even 20-hour experience that feels almost like a mini sequel. I think they should do the same thing for a DLC expansion for Ninja Gaiden 4, but the major element that I need to see is that it's going to be based around Ryu Hayabusa. Maybe Yakumo can have an appearance here and there, but I think they should be primarily centered around Ryu. And this is how they give him his arsenal back, right? Because just like I said, instead of just unlocking it by pulling out your credit card and all that and just buying them individually to go through the same levels, you instead have this massive new story centered around Ryu, 4 to 6 hours long, where you have new missions littered with new enemy types, and then finish them off with a new boss battle that has one of Ryu's weapons. That could even be part of the story. Ryu's arsenal was stolen by this group of powerful rival clan ninjas or whatever, or like, anything, fiends, like just or like a completely new threat, would take hold of his weapons from his past, and now he's on a hunt to get them back. That would be like super enjoyable. And again, like it would feel like it was actually worth the money, because now you're actually getting new exciting bosses to fight, and you're getting new, enemies and new missions alongside everything. And on top of all that, like the cherry on top is that you're getting all of your old weapons back in a very exciting and fun way. And yeah, you still have to pay for it, which is of course still going to upset people. But I think that this is the best way that they can make up for the decisions that they've made with Ryu. So it's very difficult to say if any of this is actually going to come to fruition. We already know that like there's likely going to be like Momiji and Ayane, like the female characters will likely be unlockable too later down the road. I'm just hoping that all of these ideas are just split up into individual packages. I think that it's most gratifying for players if you get all of these concepts and all this content in one nice big bundle. Maybe you can have even the option where it's like, if you want the big story expansion with all these new playable characters and new weapons for Ryu, maybe even some new weapons for Yakumo, and you can buy it all for like a $30 bundle, or you can get it all kind of like individually, like if you so choose. So that's how I hope they distribute DLC. I really think that Ryu deserves his own standalone story. Hopefully he's not as limited as it sounds like he will be. I really wish that the interviewer would have been like corrected by the developers, right? If they were, when they asked the question, like, oh, it seems like Ryu's taking like a side role, like being sidelined, and Yakumo's coming into like, the full picture. I would have liked if they had like corrected him and been like, well, like here's like, Yakumo's very important, but Ryu's in no way being sidelined, right? Like they're very like equal in manner, but they haven't really done that. They seem like they are very like clearly obvious, like, yeah, Ryu is kind of taking a side role in this latest installment, and Yakumo's definitely in the spotlight. Like I said, I'm hoping that Yakumo like wins me over along with everyone else. I hope this game is successful despite all of these revelations. I am still like, Ninja Gaiden 4 is still my most highly anticipated game of this year. That has not changed. I just hope that the base game, Ryu is very much involved, not just narrative wise, but like gameplay wise. I hope he doesn't feel limited despite the fact he only has the Dragon Sword, which I should add, because I was a huge fan of Ninja Gaiden 3, like the original Ninja Gaiden 3, even before Razor's Edge. The Dragon Sword is my favorite weapon, like anyways, right? So it's not like this broken, like completely shattered my expectations kind of thing because he doesn't have his arsenal at launch. Because the Dragon Sword is my primary, and I really mean that. I mean, like, I'd argue like 85, maybe 90% of my playthroughs of any Ninja Gaiden game, I'm using the Dragon Sword, with the other 10 or 15%, me literally just like occasionally toying around with the other weapons that you have in your disposal, which is like crazy. Like, you would think with a game with that amount of weapons, I would be messing around with them as much as possible. But no, I actually do just prioritize the Dragon Sword for most of my time. So naturally, being only limited to that is not the end of the world, but I of course do like to play around with different weapons, especially in different playthroughs. And I also just don't like the idea of that being a representation of Ryu being sidelined. So here's hoping that DLC will come around and it will be centered around Ryu alongside unlocking his massive arsenal.